Resident Evil Genesis, a novelization by Keith R.A. De Candido. Chapter 3. When Alice Abernathy was a little girl growing up in Columbus, she had imagined that getting her wedding picture taken would be a glorious moment of joy. She'd be surrounded by friends and family, a band playing her favorite music, and tons of food and drink. Dressed in a beautiful white dress, her prospective husband in a tuxedo — it had to be a tuxedo, she'd never marry a man who wouldn't get married in a tuxedo — they'd stand as close to each other as they could, reveling in the feel of their embrace, while the photographer said something ridiculous like, "Say cheese." The moment of pure happiness would be frozen forever in that photograph. The mansion on the outskirts of Raccoon City was a long way from Ohio, both physically and metaphorically. 2.5 decades removed from that childhood fantasy, Alice found herself in the white dress, embracing a man she barely knew, as a photographer employed by the Umbrella Corporation muttered something non-committal and snapped another photograph. At least her husband was wearing a tuxedo. It was all part of their cover. Alice had taken over as the head of security for the Hive, the semi-secret underground facility owned and operated by the Umbrella Corporation. However, the promotion came with a new assignment. The person who ran security for the Hive had to spend the first 3 months of the job with what was considered either the best or worst assignment in Umbrella's security division: mansion duty. The mansion, a massive estate that felt to Alice like it belonged in a museum or a Jane Austen movie rather than a suburb of a small American city, was located in the neighborhood of Foxwood Heights, 2 miles outside the Raccoon City limits. Raccoon itself only had an official population of approximately 853,000, including the 500 employed by Umbrella who lived and worked in the Hive. The existence of the Hive was not kept a secret. It was impossible to sequester away 500 employees, many of whom were in the upper echelons of their respective fields, without someone noticing they were missing, though it was not widely advertised either. Umbrella kept its public headquarters in downtown Raccoon, where everyone could see it, the public face of the company that provided the best computer technology and healthcare products and services in the country. Part of Alice's job, and that of her fictive husband, was to keep the public from knowing any more than that. Mansion duty meant posing as the couple who lived in that weird old mansion that all the guides to Raccoon cautioned against tourists visiting. Although an architectural marvel built by an eccentric old millionaire in the 1960s, and rumored to be filled with trapdoors, secret corridors, and other reflections of the millionaire's obsession with spy thrillers, it was currently occupied by a reclusive couple who did not appreciate strangers knocking on their door and asking to see their house. More than one nosy visitor had found themselves escorted out of the area by the Foxwoods Heights Police Department, or even sometimes the Raccoon City Police Department, for trespassing. That couple's reclusive tendencies were a direct result of their not being a true couple, but the latest 2 members of Umbrella's security division who had drawn mansion duty. For unbeknownst to the people who wrote those tourist brochures, the mansion was, in truth, a secret access point to the Hive. Given the nature of the work Umbrella did in the Hive, the mansion was the first line of defense against everything from reporters to industrial sabotage to outright thievery. In theory, that made their work of critical import to Umbrella's security. In reality, their work was boring as heck. Within a day of the picture being taken, mansion duty had begun for Alice and her new partner, whom she learned was named Percival S. Parks. For obvious reasons, he did not go by his first name. The middle initial stood for Spencer, and he said that everyone just called him Spence. Unlike Alice, who had been with the company for 5 years, following her distinguished but frustrating stint in the Treasury Department, Spence was new to Umbrella. The 2 of them would spend the next 3 months in a facsimile of wedded bliss. They had each been given plain gold wedding bands with the oh-so-romantic inscription, "Property of Umbrella Corporation," on the inside. Pictures of the pair of them had been placed at strategic spots throughout the massive expanse of the mansion's interior. When she explored the library, she found that all the books that had been there when she and Spence took their wedding photos had been replaced. She recognized about half the titles as either her favorite books or ones she had intended to read someday, and assumed that the other half were on a similar list of Spence's. An entire sitting room was given over to an entertainment center that included state-of-the-art CD and DVD players, all from Perrymook Sounds, a subsidiary of the Umbrella Corporation. Shelves full of CDs and DVDs, half of which were of her favorite music and movies, a plasma widescreen television, also from Perrymook, and 2 very comfortable chairs. Next to the sitting room was a corner room with beautiful exposure, full of what looked to Alice like sculpting equipment, a kiln, clay, a small firing oven, and several small tables. She guessed that Spence was an amateur potter in his spare time. Off the studio were 2 small rooms with much smaller windows, providing the same view as the picture window in the studio. Each room had a desk, computer station, fax machine, phone, PDA mounted to the computer, and an incredibly comfortable-looking leather chair from which to operate all of that machinery. These would be their offices. The bathroom was a lavish affair, all marble, with a clawfoot bathtub and a tub-sized shower stall. Her favorite soaps and shampoos were stocked in the cabinet. The closets were filled with clothes that Alice assumed fit her perfectly. Some of them were even aesthetically pleasing. The wardrobe was filled with perfectly pressed underclothes, aside from the bottom drawer, where their emergency cache of weapons was kept under code lock. They were told only to use the weapons in case of a real threat. That meant no using them on innocent civilians. Alice had been sorely tempted to ask where Jehovah's Witnesses fell on that scale. She relished the idea of greeting one of them at the door with a fully armed MP5K. As usual, her bosses had been thorough. "Looks like we got the fun job," Spence said, entering the bedroom and taking a seat in the massive easy chair. "Fun. Right. What, you don't like lounging around the nicest mansion in the state doing nothing for 3 months?" "Not really. I didn't take this job to sit on my butt." Spence leaned back, the chair unfolded, the bottom springing upward to prop his feet. "Too bad it's a nice butt." Turning toward him, she gave him a glare. He grinned. "Sorry. Couldn't help but notice. Besides, with any luck, this'll be a stepping stone. Maybe working for the big bosses or the commandos." Alice snorted. "The Thug Squad? No thanks." "They're not thugs, Alice." Spence actually sounded outraged at her characterization. "Maybe not, but they've got delusions of grandeur. I mean, come on, the head thug calls himself One. This isn't the damn CIA. We're a private corporation. We don't need to go around with stupid James Bond code names. Why can't he just use a real name?" "Shot in the dark here, but maybe for security." "Hardy har har." She walked over to the makeup table. All her favorite brands were represented. "Then he can call himself Fred or Bill," she smiled, "or Percival." This time he glared at her. "Hardy har har." The smile became a full grin. She decided that if she was stuck with mansion duty, at least it was with someone she was starting to like. Security Division was well stocked with jerks, including the self-styled One, so she was grateful for this at least. "Anyhow, I can't stand that kind of pretentious nonsense. I got enough of that crap in the Treasury." He blinked. "You were in the Treasury? Secret Service?" "No, I should have been, but I was missing a vital qualification." "Oh?" Giving Spence a smirk, she said, "A penis?" "Come on, in this day and age?" Alice barked to laugh. "All being in this day and age means is that they need to come up with better excuses to keep us out. I passed every damn test they threw at me. I outfought, outshot, and outsmarted all the men at my level. The women they did promote were all less qualified than me, but they also..." She hesitated. "They also what?" Spence prompted. Trying not to sound too catty, Alice said, "Well, let's just say you wouldn't be complimenting any of them on what a nice butt they had." "Ah, woof woof." Something like that, Alice said, thinking that men were all crude at heart no matter what. They kept me investigating counterfeiters while the guys I came up with got to go to the White House. So you came here? Yeah. She sighed and sat down on the large bed. The mattress was firm but giving and felt like one of those fancy Swedish ones that didn't have coil springs but some kind of foam thing. The work isn't that much of an improvement, especially this little nonsense assignment, but at least I'm paid better. Got that right, Spence grinned. Well, for what it's worth, I've heard a lot of good things about you. From whom? Alice asked with a frown. Everybody I asked. Butt-kicking Alice, they called you. She rolled her eyes, having hoped that particular nickname would have died out by now. It had, after all, been 5 years since the training exercise, when she had put their training officer, one's predecessor, a man named Martinez, in the hospital with a single well-placed kick to the shin. But it seemed they were just limiting themselves to saying it behind her back. Turning her gaze at her new partner, she asked, So what's your story? What makes you think I have a story? I've been here 5 years, Spence. Everyone in security has a story. For one thing, someone who works here but also sculpts has to have a story. At that, Spence frowned. Sculpts? Alice returned the look. You don't sculpt? No. Then who's the kiln for? Suddenly, Spence leaned his head back and laughed. Oh, Jesus, I know what it is. Back when I filled out my application here, they asked me for hobbies. I don't have any hobbies, at least not any that aren't work-related. I mean, yeah, I run and work out, but that's all for the job. So I said I like making pottery. I just pulled it out of my butt. Laughing, Alice said, Too bad. It's a nice butt. Spence grinned. Fine, Alice said. Whatever, that still doesn't answer my question. What question? What's your story? The place is littered with ex-law enforcement types who wound up here because it sucks everywhere else. There's gotta be a story there. Actually, that's not the reason I came to Umbrella. Oh? Spence refolded the easy chair, got up, and joined her on the bed. He bounced on it a few times as he sat, like a little kid playing trampoline with his butt. Nice, firm. He was, she noticed, looking at her body rather than her face. It's definitely a good mattress. Who says I was talking about the mattress? Slow down, Percival, she said with a grin. Hey, you're the one who said I have a nice butt. You still haven't answered my question. You already answered it for me. I was doing just fine as a cop in Chicago, but Umbrella has one thing that no police department in this country has. She gave him a questioning look when he didn't elaborate right away. Massive amounts of cash. I'm doing the same work I was doing with the CPD, but for about 5 times the salary. He leaned back on the bed, propping himself on his elbows. Better pension, too. Not to mention getting to live in a big mansion with a beautiful woman for 3 months. Alice got up from the bed and laughed. You don't give up, do you? I'm persistent. I don't give up until I get what I want. It's what makes me good at my job. Good thing, 'cause you certainly won't get by on your looks. Hey, what about my nice butt? Why do you think I was looking at your butt instead of your face? Spence mimicked being wounded in the chest. Ouch! Shot to the heart. Don't worry, Spence. If I ever really shoot you, it'll be between the eyes. That isn't very romantic. Her voice grew serious. This job isn't romantic. It's mostly boring, mindless, and irritating, right up until they need you to perform, at which point it's exciting, nerve-wracking, and requires you to be either absolutely perfect or really, really dead. She looked away. Romance doesn't enter into it. Even as she spoke the words, she thought about living with Spence for 3 months, babysitting the secret door in the mirror, checking people as they came in and out, filling out daily reports that she could after 5 years do in her sleep, and otherwise just sitting around going through the books in that library or the DVDs in the sitting room. A breathing sound echoed through the high-ceilinged mansion. Alice tensed, then realized that it was the cordless phone on the nightstand next to the bed. She walked over, picked it up, and hit the talk button. "Yes?" "Janice," said the voice on the other side. That, Alice knew, was the code word indicating that this was a security call. She immediately hung up the phone and moved into the living room. Spence got up and followed her. Next to the Louis XIV's couch, which Alice had been afraid to sit in when she first arrived for fear that a museum guard would yell at her not to touch the exhibits, sat a beautiful wooden end table that looked to be as much an antique as the couch. It doubled as a cabinet, probably originally intended to store drinks or table linens or some such. This one housed a red phone that was attached to a phone line installed under the end table via a hole drilled into the bottom that probably cut the piece's value by 80%. The receiver was attached to the hook via a good old-fashioned spiral phone cord. As good as telephonic security could be, a hard-wired line was infinitely easier to secure and harder to penetrate. Alice picked up the red phone. "Prospero." The voice on the other side was the same androgynous voice that had called on the main phone. "Verify position." At that point, Alice let out a breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. It was just a simple check-in call, making sure that she and Spence were safely ensconced. "We're in the house. All's well." Verified. Out. The line went dead. "And you have a nice evening, too," she sighed, hung up the phone, and closed the end table cabinet door. Spence smiled. He had, she decided, a charming smile, and he really did have a nice butt. "So, 10 o'clock and all's well?" "Something like that," she said. "So, want to show me how to make an ashtray?" He laughed. She liked his laugh, too. Maybe this assignment wouldn't be quite so boring after all. Chapter 4. Over the last 2 months, Lisa Broward had learned to well and truly despise the Hive's computer system. Since it first came into existence, Umbrella had always had state-of-the-art computer technology, always first with the newest innovations in both hardware and software. What they put on the market was usually about 5 years behind what they had for themselves. The head programmer for the most recent upgrade to the Hive was a British man named Dr. Simon Barr. Lisa had first encountered Barr at MIT when she was an undergraduate, and he was teaching a class in applied artificial intelligence. He opened the semester with a variation on Lewis Carroll that had fooled most of the students, including Lisa, into thinking he would be one of those charming, daffy old Brits. "The time has come," the walrus said, "to speak of many things," he had said. "Of bits and bytes and decision trees, of compilers and fMRIs, and if the software is well designed and whether they're truly living machines." After lulling the students into a false sense of security, he dropped the bombshell. Nobody in the class would receive any higher than a B, and most would receive a C or D grade. His theories, he explained, were far too sophisticated for any undergraduate to possibly begin to comprehend. He only taught the class because the powers that be had convinced him that he might find 1 or 2 great programmers there, and it behooved him and those potential great students to benefit from Barr's own vast stores of knowledge. However, he had said 99.9% of the students would not be great programmers, and probably that last 0.1% wouldn't be either. And this was truly an appalling waste of his time, but he supposed they had better get on with it and get it over with. That speech alone prompted half the class to drop it. Barr announced the second day of class that now that he had weeded out the stragglers and the ones who wouldn't amount to anything except some job as a corporate drone writing drab code for unappreciative middle management types, you are going to work your brains to the very nub. He also reiterated his position. Nobody would get higher than a B. But you will learn more from me than from any other professor you will ever have in your life. Half the remainder dropped the class after that. Lisa decided two things at that point: that she would stick with the class no matter what, and that she would get an A. She spent the next 3 months being subjected to an amazing amount of abuse, vitriol, condescension, and also the most brilliant theories on AI she had ever heard before or since. Barr came by his arrogance honestly. He truly was an absolute master of the field. He also made no effort to talk down to his students, leaving most of them scrambling to try to decipher what he was talking about. Except Lisa, who lost a great deal of sleep, dropped 10 pounds off an already rather skinny frame, got sick regularly, and came dangerously close to a nervous breakdown more than once. But damn it, she followed every single word Barr ever spoke in that arrogant tone that was peculiar to Brits. On her final exam, he wrote the following on the back. Miss Addison, I commend you. You have tremendous drive and a willingness to apply yourself to the task at hand. You also have a stick-to-itiveness that one does not see in the younger generation much anymore. One might admire you for your perseverance in pursuit of understanding of this subject. However, you will not number me among those admirers. All you have proven is that you are able to parrot back the works of greater intellects. The fact that you had to work so hard to comprehend this class merely proves that you lack the creative spark yourself. You are, in fact, precisely the sort who will become the type of corporate drone that I despise. The only difference is that you will be much, much better at it than most, though to my mind that is akin to being the best muckraker in the cow farm. Nevertheless, you have performed the tasks you were given in the class, and I would be dishonest if I did not give you fitting reward for that accomplishment, even if it is less of an accomplishment than I might desire. A. In later years, Lisa would admire Dr. Barr's ability to fulfill her every wish and destroy them all at the same time. Back then, however, she was up most of the night crying. Now, here she was, 10 years later, having fulfilled his prognostications by spending her career as a corporate drone, even excelling at it, as he had also predicted, only to find herself providing security for his latest and greatest system, the Red Queen. Barr was currently working in Umbrella's London office, working on some new system that would be even better than the Red Queen, but for now, this AI, which was about a decade ahead of any other computer system available on the open market, was the best possible. This was a computer system that was in many ways the holy grail of AI. It was adaptable, flexible, and even had a personality. For some inexplicable reason, the personality he gave to the Red Queen was that of a 10-year-old girl. Specifically that of Angela Ashford, the young daughter of one of the muckety-mucks in research and development. Lisa couldn't imagine that Barr came up with that himself, as it required a level of sentimentality the old man simply did not possess. No doubt it was required by Ashford or one of his supporters on the board of directors. Never having met Angie Ashford, Lisa had no idea if the personality Barr had programmed in matched that of the young child. She suspected it didn't, that Barr had made the girl as unpleasant as possible, in revenge for the political sop to Ashford that modeling the computer after his daughter likely was. If, on the other hand, the personality did match that of the real Angie Ashford, Lisa had the utmost sympathy for Dr. Ashford's pain and suffering. Lisa's job description was to make sure that the Red Queen's systems remained secure. In reality, this meant spending all her days dealing with a 10-year-old girl who had inherited her creator's attitude problem. "It isn't working," the Red Queen said in her prissy little schoolgirl voice. The voice came crisply from the Perimug speakers sitting on either side of Lisa's flat-screen monitor. The upper right-hand corner of said monitor was taken up with the image of a prissy little schoolgirl face. whose lip movements matched the sounds. Sighing, Lisa wondered why anyone would find this preferable to a simple error message. As it was, that face was a daily reminder of why she was eternally grateful that she and Nick had decided not to have kids. "All right," she said, typing in a sequence of commands. "Let's compile it again. See where the error crops up." "We don't need to do that. The error is in the patch you wrote. Don't worry about it. I can rewrite it for you." "No, you can't either," Lisa said. "Show me where the error is. I'll fix it." 8 weeks, and the damn machine still was treating her as if she were an idiot. Like programmer, like program. "Very well, if you insist, but it's wholly unnecessary. I can do this myself. The whole point of having an artificial intelligence is to give me the opportunity to be intelligent." Barr had said the same thing 10 years ago at MIT, word for word. No surprise he programmed it into his greatest achievement. Luckily, Umbrella's higher-ups were a bit more far-sighted, or at the very least had seen 2001. No matter what happened, there was always to be some human oversight to anything the Red Queen did. In the last 2 months, Lisa had learned that Barr had not been thrilled with this, and had tried to have Lisa's position eliminated after her predecessor transferred to another department. Instead, they took the job out of Barr's purview. Although she worked with the computer system, she was not part of the computer services staff. She reported to the security division. Though most of their work involved the physical security of Umbrella's various corporate headquarters and their employees, Umbrella's bosses decided to include electronic security. That meant that she reported directly to the head of security division, a taciturn man who went solely by the unlikely code name of One. They still put her in with the other techies, though, giving her a sleek metal desk, indistinguishable from all the other sleek metal desks. On the far wall was a large window covered in blinds that gave a spectacular view of the Raccoon City skyline. All the more spectacular by virtue of its being fake. They even piped in muffled street noises. It was Umbrella's way of making them feel like they weren't 1,000 feet underground. After all, despite the size of the hive, it could still get damn claustrophobic, knowing you were spending all your time in a big hole in the ground, surrounded on all sides by earth, rocks, mud, or whatever the hell made up the underside of Raccoon City. Lisa had no idea, nor did she care to. She just tried, like everyone else did, to pretend that the view out the window was real, that the sounds she heard were genuine. Sometimes she even believed it. She often wondered how anyone stood this for 5 years, and was grateful that, one way or another, she was not going to find out for herself. Even as she found the error in her patch, which was a simple typographical error, one she would have caught 5 minutes ago if the Red Queen hadn't insisted on getting huffy about it, the phone rang. Wanting to keep her hands free to type, she plugged the headset into the appropriate jack in the phone, hooked it around her ear, adjusted the mic so it was near her mouth, then hit the speaker button. The phone routed the sound, which would normally go out on the phone's speaker, to the headset. "Broward." "Lisa, it's Alice." Smiling at the familiar voice, Lisa said, "How's life among the rich and famous?" Dryly, Alice said, "Oh, thrill a minute, like usual." Unlike One, who was at HQ in Raccoon City proper, Alice, currently in charge of security for the Hive, stationed along with Spence Parks at the lavish mansion that served as one of the main entry points into the Hive, was approachable and easy to work with. Like One, she didn't take any nonsense. Unlike One, she didn't give any either. As long as there wasn't a crisis, she would actually talk to you like a real person. Although Lisa's desk was in the same general area as the other tech folks, they viewed her with disdain, as she wasn't really one of them. Unfortunately, she didn't really have much in common with the gaggle of ex-cops and ex-cons that made up the security division either. Alice, though, was different. She didn't treat Lisa like some kind of weird other being who didn't belong in the club because she couldn't field strip an M16 or whatever kind of fancy weapon the thugs in security hauled around. Not that it mattered all that much whether or not Lisa made friends, not given her long-term goal. Still, in the short term, it was nice to have someone to talk to, especially when that someone also had the potential to help out with the long-term plans. "So what's the problem?" Lisa asked. "I can't get into my account." Again, Lisa sighed. I know, there's a problem with the protocols. I should have it fixed in a few minutes, assuming Her Royal Highness doesn't throw a fit." "I heard that." Making a face at her monitor, Lisa said, "You were meant to." Lisa heard Alice Abernathy laugh. After rewriting a few more lines of code, Lisa said, "Okay, try it now." There was a pause, though Lisa could hear the clickety-clack of Alice's fingers moving quickly over her keyboard. "Damn it, I still can't get in." Lisa frowned. "You sure?" "Yes, I'm sure. It says access denied in big letters on top of my monitor." "That's a pretty good indicator, yeah. Hold on a sec." She entered a few more commands. All the computers in the hive, including the 2 in the mansion, were hardwired to the overall Red Queen network, and it was a simple matter for her to provide a more direct link between her and Alice. When she was finished, it was as if they were a single workstation that had just happened to have 2 keyboards. Her monitor lit up with a window taking up the right-hand side of her flat-screen display. It showed her what Alice was seeing on her monitor, complete with access denied in big letters along the top. In the center of the screen were 2 fields, currently empty, asking for username and password. Lisa hit F11, then entered her own username and password at another prompt. The latter was a series of numbers she had literally picked at random. Lisa had always had a good memory for numbers. She never had to write down phone numbers nor use a speed dial for them, so she was always able to pick wholly random passwords. Always the most secure. Her username was standard, of course, L. Broward. All the usernames were keyed to last name preceded by first initial, the latter a necessity, especially since there was a guy down in medical named Philip Broward. In fact, just in the hive alone, there were 14 people named Smith, 10 named Jones, 6 named Clark, plus 1 named Clark with an E, 3 named Martinez, 2 named West, and oddly 3 named Miluski, all 3 unrelated to each other. Entering that username and password rewarded her with a series of commands and codes in another window on the left-hand side, right under the faux adorable face of a 10-year-old child that Lisa had never met yet desperately wanted to drown. She then Alt-tabbed over to the other window, using the trackpad located between the main keyboard and the number pad, to place the cursor in the username field and enter A. Abernathy. "Okay," she said to Alice, "enter your password." This time, the clickety-clack that Lisa heard over her headset was matched by the appearance of several asterisks in the password field. "Done," Alice said after 14 asterisks appeared. "That's some password." "It's my birthday," Alice deadpanned. "Right, when you're reincarnated in the year 1 billion. Lisa followed the streams of code that flew past the window on the left-hand side of her monitor. Even as the right-hand side once again declared access to be denied and cleared the username and password fields. "Damn it," Alice said again. "What's wrong?" "You're going to need a new birthday," Alice said with a smirk. "Don't you always complain that you're bored up in that mansion?" "Yeah, mainly because I am always bored up in this mansion." "Then you should have plenty of time to read my memos." "What memo?" "The one I wrote 6 weeks ago that says you have to change your password every week, and anyone who goes 8 days without changing it will be locked out." "Oh, that memo! You do know that there are 7 days in a week, right?" Lisa laughed. "Yeah, but I thought I'd be generous and give everyone an extra day in case they forgot." Pretty pointless, as it turns out, since anyone who doesn't remember for 7 days isn't likely to get a sudden burst of memory given another 24 hours, but I like to live the life of a cockeyed optimist. No, you just like to be an even bigger pain in the butt by pointing out that we're all too stupid to remember to change our password, even when given an extra day. That too. Lisa's tone grew more serious. All kidding aside, it's a necessary concern. Most of the security problems on networks like this are because people don't bother to take the simplest precautions, and changing your password every 8 days is pretty darn simple, don't you think? Alice sighed. Apparently not, since I haven't changed mine in 8 days. Peering at her monitor and noticing a date on a particular line, Lisa said, 9, actually. Didn't you log on yesterday? No, Spence and I had other things to deal with yesterday. All day long? Lisa grinned mischievously. I didn't know he had that kind of stamina. Very funny. Lisa noticed that Alice didn't exactly deny her lascivious interpretation of what Alice and Spence had been doing all day. After all, they were both in that decadent mansion. Most of their days were spent doing nothing, and Spence was very easy on the eyes. Not her type, really, but she could see how someone in close proximity to him every day, especially one sharing the pretense of matrimonial bliss, might want to see if his body looked as good out of the tight jeans as it did in them. She shook off the thoughts quickly. Ever since she and Nick split, she'd had an unhealthy preoccupation with other people's sex lives, which she mostly attributed to a lack of occupation with one of her own. Not that she'd had a shortage of offers, starting with Casey Acker shortly after her first day's human resources orientation session, and proceeding to potential dating partners who didn't make her want to actually projectile vomit, but she'd rebuffed all of them. After all, she had a job to do. Forming attachments would not be a good idea. That would make it harder to do what needed to be done. Whenever she felt herself weakening, she thought of Fadwa. After that, it was easy. Moving back to the left-hand window, she typed in another series of commands. The random character generator created a new password for a Abernathy account. Lisa alt-tabbed over, typed the username, and then D84GTKVB8. Then she hesitated. Taking a deep breath and blinking twice, she hit Enter. A wealth of information appeared on the right-hand side of her screen for about a second. Lisa had a phenomenal memory, and she tried to take in as much as possible. After that second, the screen went blank, replaced with 2 familiar words, Access Denied, as expected. But at last, after a month, her brilliant idea had paid off. Everything Lisa had told Alice was absolutely true. Forcing people to change their passwords on a weekly basis did wonders for keeping the Red Queen secure. The more one had to change one's password, the more creative those passwords became, and creative passwords were much harder to hack into. However, that was not why she insisted on the policy. Because it wasn't so much that people were stupid as they were lazy. Too lazy to read memos, too lazy to follow the instructions in them, especially when most of them had other concerns relating to the high-intensity work they were doing here in the hive. When you were trying to come up with the next great medical marvel, or to fulfill a government contract while being harassed by your supervisor, herself being harassed by some 4-star general in the Pentagon, remembering to change your password generally was pretty low on your to-do list. Which was exactly what Lisa was counting on. What she had just gone through with Alice, she had gone through with half the employees of the hive. Each time, Lisa had to reset the password and test it, and each time, she'd been able to see the information that the person in question was trying to access. Most of the time, that information was harmless, personal, uninteresting, or all three. Occasionally, it would be something she wasn't allowed to see. Although still uninteresting and or harmless, on the latter occasions she would still catch a glimpse of it before security kicked in. Even the Red Queen was only so fast, and it took her a second to recognize that there were 2 linked terminals, but only one was attached to a user authorized to view the information on the monitor. At that point, Lisa would get the access denied message. This time, though, she had something. Thanks a lot, Lisa. Alice said. "Hey, listen, you want to have lunch on Thursday? You're up for your next city trip then, right?" Lisa frowned. Umbrella knew better than to think that they could keep people holed in the ground indefinitely. Even the false images in the window could only go so far. Every employee was allowed to go topside once every 2 weeks, be outdoors, see the sun, breathe air that wasn't recycled. Lisa had heard through the grapevine that there had been a fight over that interval among the powers that be of Umbrella. Some hardliners didn't want to let anyone out at all, citing the delicate nature of the work they did as reason not to risk any kind of security breach. Others pointed out that the people they were doing that delicate work for would probably not be terrifically appreciative if the people doing that work went stark raving mad, which they would if they were forbidden from leaving the hive for 5 years running, or even 1 month running. 2 weeks had apparently been a compromise. Lisa's 2 weeks were indeed coming up on Thursday, but she was surprised to hear that Alice knew that. Then again, Alice was the head of security for the hive, and one of the top brass in security division generally. "Sure," Lisa said. Maybe then she could get the truth about her and Spence's day-long project out of her. "Great. We'll meet at the train station at 11 on Thursday." "Okay," Lisa said. The train station was the terminus of the train that went from the secret entrance under the mansion to the hive's topmost floor. That was the access point to the hive for most people, as well as the tube that went straight up to the basement of Umbrella's corporate headquarters in Raccoon City. The latter, however, was only for emergencies and for the higher-ups in the company. Lesser mortals like Lisa had to take the train to the mansion, get cleared by the happy couple in the mansion, at present Alice and Spence, and then depart. On the off chance that they were seen, they would simply be friends visiting the reclusive couple in the mansion. But that rarely happened. The mansion's reputation, and a very real threat of the law being called on trespassers, generally kept prying eyes away. Sometimes reputation was the best security. Lisa removed the headset and hit the end button on her phone. Then she stared at the monitor for several seconds. "Is something wrong?" "No," Lisa lied to the AI. "I think we've nailed this down." "Agreed. Let's hope it doesn't happen again." With that, the face of a 10-year-old child, cum Frankenstein monster, winked out from the upper left-hand corner of Lisa's flat screen. Lisa had to resist the urge to stick out her tongue at the faded image. Instead, she sat back in her vinyl chair, a product of Posture Perfect, a subsidiary of the Umbrella Corporation, designed to be ergonomically correct and damned comfortable, and thought about what she had seen on Alice's monitor. It had contained 2 graphics and a huge block of text. She hadn't caught all the text, but several words jumped out at her. T-virus, antivirus, and fatalities. All 3 words showed up several times, in fact. The graphics, however, were of more immediate concern. One showed a white rabbit being injected with some kind of blue substance. As for the other one, the more Lisa thought about it, the more ridiculous it seemed, and the more she thought that perhaps she had been imagining things. But that, she feared, was wishful thinking. The graphic had taken up about a third of the available space in the window. It was like something out of a nightmare, or one of those old monster comic books Matt had collected when they were kids. Nominally, it had a human shape, 2 arms, 2 legs, though its spine was bent in such a way that it could move on all 4s, which it appeared to be doing in the graphic. It had skin like a rhinoceros's, plated and faceted, only it was more brown and red than the gray of a rhino. Lisa wasn't sure, but it looked like there were bones sticking out amidst the corded skin. The thing's fingers and toes ended in huge claws that looked like they could rend steel. What Lisa remembered most clearly from her brief glimpse, however, was the head. It had a huge squared-off mouth, filled with jagged teeth and a tongue that looked like a snake had taken up residence in the thing's mouth. Scariest of all were the creature's eyes. It didn't have any. At once, Lisa Broward was thrilled and scared. thrilled because she had finally stumbled onto something big, something that Matt and his friends could use to expose Umbrella for the scum-sucking weasels they were. Creating fatal viruses was not part of Umbrella's corporate mission statement as far as she knew, and she was pretty sure it wasn't particularly legal either. Not to mention whatever that thing was. Scared because anything that could create a fatal virus and a monster out of every child's nightmare may not have been someone she wanted to go up against. Then she thought of Fadwa. After that, everything was easy.